Now we will have our panel discussion on OBS critical care units, how to set up, where it is needed, multidisciplinary collaboration. First, I would like to introduce our panelists. Dr. Vinita Jain, Professor OBS and Gynae PGI Chandigarh, Certified Robotic Surgeon, co-editor of textbook Modelier and Menon's Clinical OBS, published more than 130 papers, and area of interest are high-risk pregnancy, gynae endocrinology, gynae oncology. Next is Dr. Kajal Jain, whom I have already introduced, Professor, Department of Anesthesia. Dr. Anju Gorewal, Professor and Head Anesthesiology, Treasurer of AOA India, Vice President RSACP India, Editorial Board of GOACC and former Editor-in-Chief in GOACP, Coordinator of BLS ACLA training site of DMC Chandigarh, and more than 70 publications in indexed journals. Next is Dr. Angelina Gupta from Sri Gangaram Hospital, whom I have already introduced. Next is Dr. Kathy Verrill S., Associate Professor of PGIMR Chandigarh, Community Medicine, alumni of WHO Structured Operational Research Training Initiative Training Program, faculty in charge of Rural Health Training Center Narayangarh and Urban Health Training Center Sector 50 Chandigarh, published more than 50 papers. Area of interest are operational research, medical education, healthcare information technology, and non-communicable diseases. Now, I would like to introduce our moderators. Dr. Bharti Sharma, Assistant Professor, Department of OBS and Gynae PGI. Field of interest are high-risk OBS, perinatology. Master Trainer for Capacity Building, Implementation and Monitoring of Birth Defects and Stillbirth Surveillance in Southeast Asian region. More than 30 publications in peer-reviewed national and international journals. Dr. Pooja Sikka, Additional Professor, Department of OBS and Gynae PGI. Area of interest are high-risk pregnancy, medical legal surgical disorders, critical care, and maternal nearness. Over to you, ma'am.
So we shall begin by presenting the maternal death clock, which says that every 7 minutes, one woman is dying from a pregnancy-related complication in India. Significant number of deaths, suboptimal care in institutes has been seen, and any pregnant woman, we say, can develop life-threatening complications with little or no advanced warning. They are essentially of two types, with obstetric complications or with multi-organ involvement or failure, which necessitate care provision by intensivists or super specialists. The potential for catastrophic complications is constant and may develop in a matter of minutes. It's not only for high-risk pregnancies, and healthy, disease-free mothers are also at equal threat. So it necessitates that all obstetricians should be able to not only provide the best of obstetric care, but also perform or assist in performance of life-saving procedures like CPR, intubation, and care of a ventilated patient. So it is here where we fail to respond. So if we look at an obstetrician and an anesthetist, both of them know the obstetric physiology, but critical care skills are lacking in obstetrician. They are good with the anesthetist. We can perform the obstetric works, or we are good in obstetric skills, but the anesthetists are not good at obstetric skills. So if we get together, we can really create wonders. So
ma'am, I would like to ask Dr. Vinita Jain, can we further improve our obstetric care? What are your suggestions, ma'am?
Thank you, Bharti. Before I answer this question, I just want to give a background to our anesthetic colleagues about maternal mortality. The maternal mortality was more than 300 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. That's how we define our maternal mortality ratio in the year 2001. When it was realized that the obstetric care was not skilled enough and the women were not having institutional deliveries. So we had national programs so that we have improve our institutional delivery rate and we improve our skilled birth attendants so that we can take care of the obstetric complications. And yes, with all this effort, by 2016, we had brought down the maternal mortality rate to 165 per 100,000 live births. And we realized that the obstetric skills had really improved. The institutional delivery rate had gone up. almost 80% institutional delivery rate was there. But then we realized that whatever the maternal deaths were occurring, 1/3 of these deaths were occurring in institutions of the level of district health care, district health center and above. And also there was an increase in the indirect maternal death. That means we were able to take care of the deaths which were occurring due to obstetric problems, but the indirect deaths which were due to complications which were associated with pregnancy, like cardiac problems, nephrology problems, and due to hypertension, these were the ones which were taking away our mothers. So we needed a set of skill providers who could give us something more than just obstetric care, and we needed critical care units. So where we stand now is that we need to have specialized obstetric care units where we can have the help of physicians, intensivists, nephrologists, cardiologists. We need to have protocols to work in these units, and we need a multidisciplinary approach. So now, to improve further our obstetric care, we need specialized HDUs and ICUs, which we will be talking about now for the obstetric patients.
So Kajal ma'am, I want to know specifically what are levels of critical care?
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
The levels of maternal critical care, for the sake of, triaging your patients, that can be divided into 3. Is my voice echoing? Maybe you can switch off your mic for a minute. Yeah, is that better? You can just switch off your mic for a minute, then you can switch it on. The main mic of telemedicine. Yeah. Is it better? Yeah. So what I want to say is, like, we all know that this is very good for triaging a critically ill woman. You can identify. So for those of us who are doing labor room, we all know that is level 1. All patients are like normally laboring patients who require oxytocin infusion, and those who need little bit of monitoring. Say you have got a hypertensive patients and they are on antihypertensive drugs, but you need to see their fluid status, and you need to monitor their urine output, the routine stuff. That goes to the level 1. But those patients who require single organ support and they require oxygen supplementation, say with a CPAP or a venti mask, are the ones which need a level higher, and they classify for high dependency unit care. Okay. But the ones who have got multi-organ involvement, or those who require higher oxygen support, the care of a patient with on a ventilator and then dialysis, these are the ones who qualify for intensive care. So I hope I'm clear. Like, yeah, exactly. So in level 3, you need to support 2 or more organs, and I've already added these things. So these are the kind of patients you can, triage based on the level of care they want.
Specific for pregnant population only. For every medical surgical disorder, there has to be a level of care. So specifically for maternity patients, this is what you wanted to highlight.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
For all patients, we need to do a triaging, and for obstetric, I'm talking about this in terms of obstetric levels of care.
So when our pregnant patients are in general ward, it is level 0 care, and
Yes.
when they reach ICU, it is level 3 care. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you, ma'am. So this question is for Dr. Anju. Ma'am, what proportion of obstetric population do you feel requires a critical care support? Will eventually maybe require critical care support?
I think somewhere around 1 to 3% of obstetric population may require critical care, and especially in the antenatal period, the care that is required is more of for respiratory support issues, whereas in the postpartum period, the issues would shift to hemodynamic stability. We look at the world data. There are hospital admissions of somewhere around 0.7 to 13.5 per thousand deliveries in US. as compared to UK, which has a better care. I would say if I look at their ICU admissions, it's 0.17 to 2.6 per thousand deliveries. Indian population, of course, we don't have very robust data coming from every part of our country, but somewhere around 5 to 12 admissions per thousand deliveries. So these are the kind of rates that we look at. Perhaps would escalate if we have more better HDUs and ICUs available to us. Was I audible?
Anju, ma'am, you are not audible.
Well, I could hear her.
Am I audible now?
We couldn't hear anything.
No, we could hear.
We could hear.
Could hear Pooja. She was audible to us.
Yeah, she was.
What I talked about is basically, am I audible to you all now? Yes?
Yes.
Otherwise, you are audible, Dr. Anju.
Ma'am, there is some
Ma'am, please
technical
give us
error.
some
Please
time,
wait.
please.
Just
Please.
wait for 5 minutes, ma'am.
Okay. I believe you closed your mic. That could be one of the reasons for some errors dropping in. Am I audible now?
Now you are
Yes,
audible.
yes, ma'am.
So what I was talking about is just to repeat, I think for the sake of non-audibility, is that 1 to 3% of the obstetric population would require critical care support. Most of them in the antenatal period would be requiring a respiratory support, whereas in the postpartum period, it is mainly hemodynamic supports that they need. And admissions across India, from whatever data we have, is been found to be somewhere between 5 to 12 admissions per thousand deliveries that come in. The lowest rates, of course, are for UK, and we are kind of equivalent to US. But I believe that with advent of more HDUs and facilities coming across district places and smaller,
Have a very good or rich data as of now. Okay, ma'am.
So, ma'am, now I would like to ask Dr. Vanita, why to address this issue of obstetric critical care separately? Because we already have ICU. So why we are talking about obstetric critical care units, ma'am?
Yeah, Bharti, we have had traditionally the critical patients of the obstetrics specialty have been looked after by the main ICU or the medical ICU. But we all know that in high caseload facilities, these ICUs are always more than full of their capacity. So we saw that the obstetric patients, when they require the critical care services, they have to wait for a very long time. And in obstetrics, we know when things go wrong, they really go very fast. They go wrong very fast. So it used to be a disadvantage for the obstetric patients to wait for a bed in the ICU. Secondly, these medical ICUs are tuned to looking after non-obstetric patients. So whenever there was an obstetric emergency, they were like a critically ill obstetric patient starts delivering in a main ICU, it creates a lot of panic. So they are not geared to looking after obstetric patients. And thirdly, now we have more and more patients who are becoming pregnant at a higher age. They are older patients, they are obese, they have undergone assisted reproductive techniques, and because of their age, they have other non-communicable diseases like obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and therefore they need more super specialty care. So there is a need to have a separate area or a specialized area for these patients where they can be looked after. And it has been, in fact, we have started with obstetric ICUs, and preliminary data is already showing that having an obstetric ICU has a high impact on reducing maternal mortality. So we definitely need to have a specific identified obstetric critical care unit, or to have specified beds in a main ICU if you cannot have an obstetric ICU.
So, ma'am, you mean to say that over last 20 years, we have realized that our patients get sick and our population is getting sicker also?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we have taken care of the basic obstetric skills, and now we need to work on the provision of care for these patients who are critically ill.
So that's why to take care of obstetric patients, even our government of India has introduced a guidelines for obstetric HDU and ICU in 2016, and they have come up with the operational guidelines for setting up obstetric ICU and HDU at district level or tertiary care center. And so, ma'am, I would like to ask you, what are the recommendations from these guidelines?
Yeah, so Government of India by 2016, they realized that now we need to work on giving critical care to these women. And therefore, these guidelines are basically detailing the recommendations for establishing HDUs and ICUs. Now, if you can see in this pyramid, the first triangle shows the healthcare pyramid for obstetric patient, which we had been following earlier. The 3-level pyramid where we had a skilled birth attendant, then we had medical officers trained in basic emergency obstetric care. We call it BMOC. And then on top of that, we have a few doctors who are trained in comprehensive emergency obstetric care. We call it CMOC. So now in 2016, the guidelines have added 2 more levels of care. That is to have obstetric HDU at a district hospital level facility and to have an obstetric ICU at the medical college facility. So these guidelines have basically given details of how to make these HDUs and ICUs. They are very good operational guidelines. They talk about everything. They have given detailed explanation of how to organize them, what are the human resources required. They have given the layouts of these. They have given admission discharge criteria, policies, the forms and the recordings that have to be done, the capacity building plan for training the healthcare staff, the list of equipments, the duties that should be taken by each cadre. So very detailed guidelines and the operationalization plan has been given so that it is easy for the states to immediately go ahead and make obstetric HDUs and ICUs. So like you have just projected that these are the recommendations, rough recommendations, that if there are 250 to 500 deliveries per month, they should have an 8-bedded HDU. If there are 500 to 1000, you can have a hybrid ICU, more than 1000 deliveries, 4-bed ICU and 8-bed HDU. Like this, depending upon the caseload, it has been recommended what kind of HDU, how many bedded, and what kind of ICU would be required so that we can bring down our maternal mortality substantially.
So what is the position of obstetricians here, ma'am? They talk about healthcare workers. MBBS people can also work as healthcare workers and get trained in comprehensive and basic emergency obstetric care.
Yes. So the first pyramid that we showed, can you go back?
Yes,
we can
yes.
show the first. Yeah, the first pyramid was we were using the medical officers. We were training them for BMOC, the basic emergency, and CMOC, that is comprehensive. But when we talk of the HDU means that the patients will have some complications. They will go to HDU. The patients who are totally uncomplicated can be triaged into a normal labor ward. So HDU is to be looked after by an obstetrician. You can have round-the-clock residents, all right, but the consultant obstetrician is in charge and is always available. And ICU is under the care of an intensivist. There is an obstetrician there, but the overall responsibility is with intensivist. So it is not medical officers at this level. When we are talking of HDU and ICU, we are talking of obstetricians, trained obstetricians and trained intensivist or anesthetist.
To have a degree.
Yeah, trained.
So ma'am, what is obstetric HDU? How it differs from our normal labor room? Because we are monitoring the patient there also, ma'am. So what is the difference?
Yes. See, obstetric HDU is a place where we will look after the patients who require more extensive care than what is given in a general ward, but not intensive enough to be given in ICU. So basically what an obstetric HDU is, it is an intermediate area between a ward and an ICU. So when a patient comes, we will triage the patient. If there is no complication, we expect that she's going to have a normal delivery, we make her go to the labor ward, which can be taken care by a skilled birth attendant. Of course, with the backup of an obstetrician, if required, if there is a complication, but a birth attendant can look after an uncomplicated pregnancy, who is likely to have a normal labor. But if any complication is identified, then we keep that patient in HDU, which means we need to have a close monitoring on that patient. They need close monitoring. They may need special interventions, which can be given by a specialist. So that is an obstetric HDU. And while you are monitoring, it is possible that you realize that the patient is deteriorating. And then we step up the patient and send her to the ICU. Similarly, a patient who is in ICU, she starts improving, does not need ICU care now. She can be stepped down to an HDU before she is sent to a ward. So basically, obstetric HDU is a platform between a ward, which means not very close monitoring, and an ICU, which means an intensive care, intensive monitoring.
So CLR is a ward, ma'am?
CLR when has patients without complications. is
So if
a
patient
labor
with
ward.
preeclampsia comes.
No,
If a
if
patient
there is
with
yes. So if you have a complication in a patient, which can be either an obstetric complication like preeclampsia, severe hypertension, antepartum hemorrhage, sepsis, H-mole, these are the kind of patients wherever you will have any
Ideally go to
obstetric
HDU.
complication, they will go to HDU. Similarly, if they have a complication not obstetric related, but otherwise like pregnancy with heart disease, pregnancy with diabetes, pregnancy with thyroid disorder, pregnancy with liver problem, these also will be looked after in HDU because they need close monitoring. So general labor ward means there is no apparent complication in this patient. And when you have a complication, they will come to HDU. Any complication, either obstetric or medical, will come to HDU.
So Kajal ma'am, what is obstetric ICU?
Yeah, as madam has already said, like we need to escalate care, your patient is in general ward or your labor ward and then comes to HDU for whatever reasons and deteriorates. Then patient comes to intensive care. With intensive care, we means intensive monitoring, or you can say it's an area of high visual acuity. Okay, it is governed by certain, protocols and manpower and sophisticated equipments because your patient requires a higher level of care. Say the bedding and the staffing is much different than that in HDU and in your labor room. Say for ICU, we need one nurse per bed because your patient is on ventilator and patient requires multi-organ support. Then it has a team of other disciplines interacting with you, and then within the ICU also you increase your vigilance levels as per the dashboard sign. So each unit should make their own dashboard signs in which you have the red flag ones, the yellow ones, and the green ones. And the basic idea is that if your patient is having some derangements and that places the patient at a higher risk, then the level of vigilance steps higher. So it's not always possible to have a consultant rotating in ICU, but if your patient is showing some red flags, that means the resident has to call now the senior person. So this is the way we increase our visual acuity in intensive care. So it is not only about patient profile, it is also about establishing protocols, having skilled nursing staff, having your sophisticated equipments in place, and then you also need other ancillary staff. So that constitutes ICU. Am I clear in my answer, Pooja?
So ma'am, ICU is an area which is governed or ruled by intensivists. What does the term obstetric mean here?
See, for obstetrics, we are all, craving to have an obstetric ICU because we all know that women are requiring intensive care more and more, as the days are progressing. And the reason has been highlighted by ma'am. See, there is now we have got improved care. People are conceiving later on in their ages, and they're having. And if you go to the rural setup, they're not visiting the antenatal clinics, so they are coming with multiple problems. So everybody wants their patient to be safe. And we all know that if we set up an ICU and we shift our patient to ICU, our patient is safe because the level of vigilance is X raised to the power, whatever. But having said that, we can't just have ICUs, everywhere and not have the level of care we desire. So at the moment, since we can't fulfill our heartfelt desire to have our own ICU, we are like finding space in other ICUs and we want some beds to be reserved, which is a perfectly okay situation currently, given the limitations of having extra staff. And let me tell you that we are not the only ones. When we talk to our international colleagues, even they face these problems. They do not have the critical care for obstetrics alone by itself because it means a lot of money. And
That's
then
what I wanted to know, ma'am.
Then to sustain it also, you need to have, that same kind of thing has to go on and on. It's a very, very, very cost effective. And if you talk about Indian scenario, most of our women who require ICU, I'm not saying they are the only ones, but the ones who require are generally belonging to a low socioeconomic status. So the entire brunt of treating a patient falls on the hospital. So whether that hospital is, can, gear up for that or no, we don't know. But as of now, it would be a good idea to start from high dependency unit.
Yes.
And antenatal period where we can step up our vigilance, try to identify women who are likely to deteriorate rather than to have them deteriorated. And from this platform, we would like to, when 200 plus students are logged in for our conference, we can at least say that develop those protocols which can, improve the clinical management of these patients at your units. Like antenatal visits should be encouraged, and women should be asked to, if they're already, having cardiac disease, they're having some low ejection fraction, they should be transported or transferred to a higher facility early on, so that they don't require high dependent intensive care. So that is one thing which we can really work on. If you remember correctly, even in our own setup, initially when we used to attend the meetings, we also used to think every time that this woman is fine, and at the third or the fourth slide, the woman would die. I'm sure that is happening in many centers. And that is primarily because when women are young, we don't expect them to be sick, because women are supposed to bring in a baby home. They're not supposed to die in ICUs. So our concept of, a woman during a pregnancy can go sick anytime should be developed through these conferences and workshops. So maybe one day will come when we see this coming true. And we will not say what is obstetric ICU. We will say recent advances in my obstetric ICU.
Yes.
Pooja, can I just add one thing to Kajal has very nicely described what the ICU means. Basically, when we are adding the word obstetric, we mean that this ICU will also have facilities for the complications which are specific to pregnant ladies, in addition to all the intensive facilities that they have. Like, it will have an eclampsia kit, it will have a PPH kit, which is something which is very specific to pregnancy. It will have a resuscitative hysterotomy kit. So you will have all the facilities of ICU. In addition, you will have the facilities for managing the obstetric complications as well. So when you bring them the two together, we call it an obstetric ICU. That is what.
Yes. Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, Angelina, ma'am, can you summarize the basic difference between obstetric, HDU, and ICU again?
Right. Okay. So as they have very well told that HDU is a intermediate level where you are transferring your patient from a normal ward to for monitoring. But ICU is where there is even further specialized monitoring which is required. So there is a different admission criteria for a HDU or an ICU. For a HDU, say, the admission criteria would be just monitoring the patient. But in the ICU, you would be dealing with multi-organ failure, dialysis, DIC, and that is the higher end. Then the head is different. For the HDU, you would have an obstetrician who is in charge. But for the ICUs, mostly it is the intensivist who are looking after. Then again, saying that the HDU you would have the facility of breastfeeding. Lactation facilities are available, but they are not so in the ICUs. But however, the ICU should have the breast pump facilities available to them. Then again, looking at the cost factor, financial constraint, the setting up an ICU is much less costly than setting up an ICU, where even a bed of ICU costs about $1 lakh. So you are looking at a massive investment in the ICU. Looking at the patient friendliness, the patient will be much more comfortable in an HDU rather than in an ICU, where it is quite uncomfortable. The sounds of the monitors going on and activities happening all the time in the ICU. So it is not really that friendly for the women to be in the ICU. But yes, if they need the level of care, they need to be there.
What I wanted to know is, ma'am, should we keep strict criteria between admissions of HDU and ICU? Suppose you don't have a bed in HDU, but you have a bed in ICU. Will you take the patient? She does not require ICU care. She requires HDU care, but you don't have a bed in HDU. Will you take that patient, obstetric patient, in ICU?
Yeah. I think there should not be strict criteria. If the patient needs any sort of care and a higher level of care, and if you do have a facility in the ICU, definitely I would shift the patient to the ICU. And then when the availability is there, then we can step her down to an HDU.
Yes.
We cannot really have a really marked distinction that no, we cannot.
This is the message I wanted from you, ma'am. Thank you. So, Dr. Anju, what is the hybrid model of obstetric ICU?
So basically, it kind of plugs in the space between the two, and was basically developed looking at centers which have lesser load of deliveries and lesser load of critical care patients coming in. So it was proposed even in the Government of India guideline that there can be a place where we have an 8-bedded hybrid model where 6 beds go to an HDU and 2 beds go to a critical care unit. But what I believe is that there is close collaboration here, because the two heads that were there in the HDU and the ICU are now together. The resources, the equipment, the manpower is also now shared. And it also answers the question that you had posed to Dr. Angelina, which talks about patients who need HDU, but there's no bed available. So I believe we take in and we escalate level of care very fast because we are in the same platform for all these patients. So to begin with, especially in smaller setups, hybrid ICUs, hybrid concept would be a better concept where you have a mix of HDU, more of HDU beds and a few ICU beds together.
So, ma'am, practically how it would look, we would have an area and the board would be writing hybrid obstetric ICU. One area in, how would it be working?
So I think it would be like a hybrid. Yes, of course, we will have to put in a board saying that it's a hybrid HDU/ICU. I would say that.
Writing obstetric ICU, and inside ICU, it is up to you. You like in some ICUs, they have a step down unit within the ICU also. So they don't write like obstetric ICU with step down unit inside. Like they just inside.
It would be an ICU.
They make an arrangement that these 1 to 10 beds are like with ventilator, and 10 to 15 beds are like the step downs, or that's how they go. There is
staffing and the infrastructure would be like that. There would be some beds which would be taken care of as an HDU, and some beds would be taken care of as an ICU bed.
Yeah, though this kind of concept would work well in a government setup. There is an apprehension in a kind of a corporate or a private setup where the word ICU by itself inculcates the fact that there will be an escalation in cost and all these things. So I think labeling it as either a hybrid HDU or an obstetric ICU, where you escalate care, but these things should be well demarcated, especially if you're working.
Yes, that is what we wanted to know, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
So, ma'am, I would like to ask Dr. Vanita, what sort of pregnancy complications should be managed in HDU?
Yeah, as I told you earlier, that a patient who needs a close monitoring will be kept in the HDU, which means there is any complication in the patient. I have already, I think, answered this, that if it is obstetric complication or any medical complications where the patient does not require vasopressor support, inotropic support, or ventilatory support, those are the ones we stepped up to ICU. So if these are the patients where we just need a very close monitoring to see whether they're improving or they are deteriorating, these are the patients will be kept in an obstetric HDU.
So Dr. Anju, so now an obstetric HDU is to be set up. Points you need to consider. HDU,
yeah. So I think one very pertinent point is that the HDU should be as near as possible to the labor floor and the labor OTs.
Okay.
And preferably have a single entry and exit, but should have an isolation room where you can house your H1N1, your HIV patients. Where, of course, we'll have a separate entry and exit. Will not be mixing up with the general patients who are there, the other patients who are there in the HDU, right? And there would be certain specifications. I believe the guidelines do lay out how much of space do you require for an HDU.
That everybody should read.
That everybody should read from the textbook. More pertinent is how you actually, logistically place and ergonomically place the beds and the nursing stations, the equipment, the flow of patients, and follow what is very pertinent, all infection control practices, the waste disposal and the pollution control practices as you would do in any other high dependency area of the hospital. So those practices need to be incorporated up here as well. Very important is that they must have a laboratory backup of a blood bank, I would say, and of course lactation support as pointed out by Dr. Angelina in these areas. So these are kind of things that we really need to look at, the logistic as well as the support infrastructure while we begin to make our HDUs.
And when you make protocols, ma'am, evidence-based protocols for patient care, you feel they would be slightly different between HDU and ICU, or the same protocol book can be circulated between obstetric HDU and ICU, obstetric ICU?
So no, we are in an obstetric ICU, we would primarily be looking at patients who need just maybe a single organ support. So definitely we will have to segregate our clinical care pathways to look at each particular organ system. Whereas in a critical area and ICU, we will have to a conglomeration of all of these together.
Yes.
So an escalation, different protocol, of course, will need to be stepped up. The same protocol maybe needs to be stepped up in case there is multi-organ involvement.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So Kajal ma'am, how do you decide that the patient can be shifted back from HDU, and where will you shift the patient back? How do you decide?
Actually, it all if you have
Is it
taken the
protocol
patient,
based or is it individualized?
so it is no. Basically, you have to see your patient is stable. So see what are the reasons and indications for which you shifted your patient in, right? See if your patient had hemodynamically unstable, say she was a patient of cardiomyopathy and she was on single drug, and now she is, she has been put on orals and she's maintaining her blood pressure, she goes back. Same way, if she had a fever spike and you had sent a culture, but in between she became hemodynamically labile and you put her on a NOR-ADR drip, but now you have a culture report, you have put her on an antibiotic and she's doing fine. You shift her back. So
and ma'am, who decides for discharge? Because I was thinking whether I should put this question to Vinita ma'am or to Kajal ma'am. Who decides for an HDU? If you want to,
it can be a combined decision.
it has to be a combined decision. Okay.
So because
That
again,
combined
I
decision.
already said the obstetric patient has got both things. She has
Yes.
got an obstetric part and then she has got some part which the intensivist has to see. Even for other ICUs in our hospital, we go like in an interdisciplinary method. We don't decide by ourselves. We take the full consultation of the treating team also. But what is more important to know is that we should not shift an unstable patient on heavy IV medications, even with severe dyselectrolytemia, to the ward. The reason is the staffing is different. The monitoring is different. Say you send your patient with potassium of 2.8, वहां पर जाकर इसको oral start कर देंगे, okay?
Yes.
And the next value comes as 2.2 and the next comes as 2 and then she has arrhythmias and dies, because that will not be monitored in your general ward, correct? So you have to see that your medications are not heavy and the patient is stable in all aspects, then ready to be shifted back. She has been switched over from IVs to orals, correct?
And both of us should take the decision.
Correct.
Oh, yes. Okay, ma'am. So, Dr. Anju again, so you decided to set up an HDU. What are the hurdles in development of HDU and ICU also? What are the hurdles you feel would come?
So one of the major hurdles would be finances.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, and because a lot of costs would be incurred into this. And we'll have to look at infrastructure, an adequate space. As I said, we need to be near your labor OT and LR floors. And then equipment, and then of course, the manpower, the human resources needs to be looked into. Whereas,
what do you suggest, ma'am? What do you think? What is the advice you give to your juniors like us? What should we do? We want to start this.
I also want to add that the main hurdle is manpower and the nursing staff. So we all know that one bed will utilize at least 4 nurses if you have to divide it into a 24 hours clock. And then they have to be given an off. So roughly 5 per bed. And if you have a 10-bedded ICU, you need 50 nurses and you're never going to get it.
And
So
moreover,
I totally agree with I agree with Kajal, because you can still buy equipment. You can collect money and buy equipment. The most important hurdle comes for the manpower, because they have to be, if you give a job to a person, it is up to the age of retirement that you have to see to it that they have enough, their salaries have to be counted. And it is a very big project to get job sanctioned, because it involves a lot of financial constraint, and the biggest hurdle is the money.
And what is happening is, to circumvent this problem, most of our Indian scenario has like the staffing the same way as the staffing would be in an HDU. Like we don't have 1:1. We'll have 3 nurses or 2 nurses looking after 1 patient, or 2 nurses looking after 3 patients. So that's I don't know whether we should succumb to suboptimal care in intensive care.
Somebody
Quality
has
will
to take the lead.
suffer. Yes, quality will
I-
suffer then.
So somebody has to take the lead, and somebody has to make the government realize that pregnant population is important. We should not let our women die. It has to come from.
Also, one
Pooja, the government of India has given a lot of sanction of finances for HDUs and ICUs to the state governments. And if you look at this guideline itself, they have calculated everything, including the furnishings, the equipments, and the money has been sanctioned. They have been given to the state governments. And if you go to the state hospitals, you will be surprised to see the kind of HDUs and ICUs that they have made.
That is what we wanted to know from Dr. Kathir, ma'am, from Dr. Kathir Vel.
So, okay, so at least this is what it appears. Maybe he can tell the ground reality. Okay.
Just wanted to add to a point that now there are many courses which are also being run for the training of the nurses. So in days and times to come, probably we will be having our trained staff, and probably that will be a good starting point.
Okay, ma'am. So you continue, please. What is the minimum training for a healthcare provider in HDU?
Right. As I was talking about the training, that in the HDU, you need to have the training of the obstetrician, the medical officer, and the staff nurse. So for the obstetrician, since they are already trained in obstetrics, so they do not need to go for a further training. But as Dr. Vinita had pointed out quite rightly, that they do not have the sufficient knowledge about the critical care. So they just need to be trained for about 10 days duration in obstetrics, in critical care. While the medical officer, they need to be trained for the basic emergency obstetric care for 10 days, and also for the critical care, also another 10 days of training is required. So that makes a total of 20 days.
So are you happy with this, ma'am? Is it all right, training in days and managing areas like HDUs?
These are the guidelines which have been given, but I really do not think that these are sufficient enough. Even when we are training for over a month or 2, then also the level is not reached. This is probably for the people who are already trained, and this is just a refresher course for them. So probably
Pooja, we are talking of a trained obstetrician. So it's a trained obstetrician who needs.
No, ma'am, the others.
No, the others, the medical officers and the staff nurses, as they say, that a staff office nurse, which is a skilled birth attendant, that needs a training of 21 days and another 10 days of critical care in obstetrics. So all these things are, they look good on papers, but when we come to reality, probably we need much more training than this. They need to be doing the training. Probably we leave them in the ICUs. It is better to give them a posting of ICUs where they can be trained further, looking at the things like intubation, IV access, blood component therapy, which is all trained. And then they need to be having emergency drills every 3 months. They should be rotating.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Pooja, what I would like, what you are saying, I can make out is that you're not happy, that this is not the ideal situation. Yes,
no, I don't know,
may not. Yes, you may not always get the ideal situation, but I would like to say the excellent should never be the enemy of good. If you can't do ideal, at least you can do as much. I mean, whatever is available. If the you have only medical officers, you will have to train them. I agree, it may not be the ideal, but then we can at least first catch the low-hanging fruits and then move up. Because you may not be able to get the ideal situation always, and it is definitely, we may not be excellent, but yes, we'll be good enough, maybe for a few deaths to be averted.
Ma'am, because in
fair enough
HDU,
bhi chalega, ma'am.
Yes, because in HDU we are not monitoring that high risk patients. We just want someone to monitor the patient, to come with the vital. That is very important, and to assess the patient when patient is going very sick or in that way. So medical officers can also work, ma'am.
Yes. And you are training them for 10 days, and then while they are working, they are getting trained as well. It's a continuum of training. When you're looking after a patient, every day you learn. So probably they will, once they know the basics, critical basics, then they will pick up fast.
So, ma'am, I've come to this question then. So, what is the role of obstetrician in HDU and obstetrician in ICU? Obstetrician.
See, in HDU, you have to remember, is basically the playground of an obstetrician. So it is the obstetrician who has to manage the patients, who has to
Both
monitor the
maternal
patients.
and fetal care.
Yes, the critical care which is needed in HTU is what the care an obstetrician can provide. In fact, that is where the difference between HTU and ICU comes. Whenever the care goes beyond the skills of an obstetrician, we move to the ICU. So as long as you are monitoring patients, an obstetrician knows how to manage a preeclampsia, knows how to manage antepartum hemorrhage. But when these patients deteriorate and they require inotropic support, respiratory support, renal replacement, that is when we need the other specialties and the patient moves to the ICU category. HDU is the playground of an obstetrician, and the obstetrician is in charge. Of course, they will take help. They will call the super specialist whenever required, and that is what our multidisciplinary approach is all about. So, but the obstetrician is in charge, whereas in the ICU, the obstetrician is a support to the person who is in charge, who is the intensivist. Obstetrician has a role there as well, because the obstetric care has to be given by an obstetrician only. But then the patient is under the care of an intensivist, because that is what is more important there. The patient requires intensive care in the other systems which are beyond the skills of an obstetrician.
So you will advise equal fetal monitoring for a mother in HDU and ICU? Equal monitoring?
That will depend upon the fetal status, Pooja.
And the maternal status? Okay.
Yes, yes. So if you feel that you have to, the fetal status is important, and a mother is in a state that she can undergo any intervention for fetal indication, that an obstetrician would have made up that decision. We will go accordingly. If I feel that for the fetus, I can do an intervention in this mother without putting her life to jeopardy, I will do a very close monitoring. Whereas if I feel the mother is too sick for any intervention for fetal indication, I will probably then not be very monitoring the fetus very intensively.
And your inputs, Dr. Anju and Dr. Kajal also.
I kind of concur with what Dr. Vanita says. Absolutely true. Wherever there is a need for support from an obstetrician, especially in a ICU setup, they are indeed indicated. And of course, the type of fetal monitoring or maternal obstetric monitoring needed will need to be collaborated and of course decided by the obstetrician.
I agree also, and as Madam has very rightly said, that high dependency unit is the domain of obstetricians, and because primarily those women, they do not require the kind of intensive care which an anesthesiologist has to give. So basically, for anesthesiologists, ventilation is the pride of anesthesiologists. So if a patient is on ventilator, they should be with us, 101%.
So, ma'am, how do you advise monitoring and care of a laboring woman in ICU? She has gone in labor now. She was with you.
So it depends, is she on ventilator or she's not on ventilator?
And baby also, everything.
So we have faced this situation, Pooja, it's a catch-22 situation. We had a couple of patients who had ARDS, and we had to have them in ICU, and then ultimately we could not salvage the baby, because we all know if the mother is not doing good, baby is unlikely to do good. So if you talk about renal failure and patient is acidotic, I don't think the baby is going to be any good. Same way, if the mother is hypoxic, then I don't think the baby is also going to do as good. So the concept of, developing a labor protocol in such scenarios would be very different.
That is what I wanted to know from Vanita ma'am also. So what is the consent you take from a patient, for a patient when she is in ICU and when she is in HDU for her baby? So
Pooja, that will totally depend upon the situation of the mother, and I will need in the ICU, I will need the help and support of my intensivist colleague who will tell me what is this. If she's in the ICU, I will ask my anesthetist colleague, my super specialists who are looking after that patient, how much is the risk to her if I am taking her up for a surgery, or if she's undergoing a vaginal delivery, what is the kind of risk that I anticipate? And with their help, I will take a decision as to how I will monitor. If she's in labor, I cannot stop labor, of course. My basic aim would be to see how I need to deliver her. And of course, that is my job to see that I deliver her as safely as possible. But whether I will do some aggressive management for the fetus or not will depend upon the inputs from my colleagues, who will tell me how sick the mother is and how much she can withstand.
And you have to do a cesarean for her, ma'am. What about the concept of operation theaters near an obstetric ICU?
The basic idea of having a specific obstetric ICU was that they have to be close to a labor ward or an operating theater, so that you can quickly shift if required. That is why we said we need separate obstetric ICU, because the main ICU will not
also has to be close to CLR, and obstetric ICU also has to be close to your labor ward only.
That is why we are asking for a separate one, because the main ICU cannot be shifted close to the labor, to the OT.
Transport of critically ill patient is also a critical event.
Yes.
And then Pooja, just to summarize, ma'am, I think as we have developed our protocols to have multidisciplinary approach, sit on a round table and discuss the patient, especially the one you were talking about, how should I allow labor to a patient? This is not a single person's decision. So one should sit together on a round table and then take a call, and then you can implement it. So we should give.
And we have started. We have begun.
Roundtable conference.
Okay. So the last question is to Dr. Kathirvel. What is your experience in the community? How much do you know we have achieved?
So is it specific to HDO and ICU?
HDO, yes, critical care for a sick mother in periphery.
Okay. So in our routine traditional teaching, critical care starts with as she gets pregnancy. So it's all pregnancy is always a high risk pregnancy. That is what our the mantra of managing pregnancy in community level. Unfortunately, we are only discussing about HDU and ICU, but I'm just going back after some discussion about, because I just had a first-hand experience visiting two of the nearby HDUs in the district level hospitals, and where I discussed things with the respective civil surgeons and also the obstetrician in charges. So where primary reason, as we all discussing about the HR issues, it is HR issues not just with the obstetrician. It is basically even the intensivist is not available, the anesthetists are not available. And for example, that is a human resource related, that is a quantity and also the quality. In the quality, when we talk about, there are obstetricians available, but not they are comfortable or confident in case of emergency to put an ET tube or even to take a sample of ABG. So even though they have a ABG facility there, but they don't know how to do the ABG. So even if it is ABG not done, so whether they can take a venous blood and then they can go for the gas analysis, they are not aware of it. So in a way, we are lagging both in the quantity and also the quality which was experienced. For example, in the district hospitals, they are delivering more than 2,000 deliveries per month, each hospital. And so ultimately, the point is why they are conducting so many deliveries in the district level hospital, why it is not happening at the periphery, why all the cases are getting referred to, because we always think decongest our tertiary care institute, especially we talk about PGI. So we say we reduce the load from the periphery. We always think about periphery is only district hospital, but the periphery is there in the primary health center where it is the first point of delivery where it is happening. So though on paper, yes, Gupta madam was also mentioning about the training and all. Yes, it is very good, but whether we are getting back how much our training imparting on this population is getting converted into managing cases at the field level. So where I'm coming, because the statistics with the statistics of SRS bulletin, we were in 400 maternal mortality ratio in 1995, and now we are in 110. And if you see some of the states, because health is a state subject, and then some of the states doing some wonder in maternal care, especially the southern states. So even if you open and see the SRS bulletin, they give separately for the EAG states, that is the Empowered Action Group states, and for the southern states, for the other states. So already the southern states achieved nearly the what you call it as the sustainable development goal, which is less than 70 maternal mortality ratio. But the what is the overall average in India? It is 110. Even we are working on this. So in this way, the quality of care, which has improved over a period of time, they have worked on identified issues, which is the first level delay and the kind of third level delay, which is tertiary care institutes are very good now. Yes, of course, we are kind of audited in and out, internal audit, external audit, everything is happening. But whether the referral linkage, the continuum of care from the primary healthcare center to the district level hospital, whether we are working on there, no, really no. We are always kind of either blaming the district level hospital, but the training which we have given to the primary healthcare medical officers, whether they are utilizing those training skills to actually reduce this load to the district level hospital, seriously speaking, it is not. So I think we need to go for a instead of the just maternal death audit, which is once again a cumbersome procedure which is going on. Still, we should actually within the state level, they should have some kind of supportive supervision of the referral system for the maternal care. So that is kind of an audit, but I don't want to call it as an audit. It is more of a supportive supervision. So there will be some kind of identifying gaps and then filling those gaps.
It is more than critical care. We have to improve upon our
That will
skills.
reduce the critical pregnant women at the district level hospital, so that the skills among the obstetrician working in HDUs or the ICUs or at the district level hospital will get improved. Further, the important point is whether we are giving a kind of training feedback to them. For example, they are referring a patients here, placenta previa, whether we are really getting some kind of referral back to them saying that this case was a placenta previa, this is how we managed. Whether such kind of discussion is happening to improve their skills or the knowledge, no, really no. So I think those things, the chain, it should not be just one-sided or it is just pointing one side. It should be kind of a circle. It should be a feedback mechanism so that they can also improvise their skills.
Okay.
So do you think that is
It's
there
for
any
Dr.
role of
Angelina.
telemedicine in this context, in creating these critical care units and disseminating our knowledge to the periphery and improving the quality of work in that way?
Definitely, as has been told time and again, we still have a very high maternal mortality rate. Although it has come down from 130 per 100,000 deliveries, which was seen in 2014 and 16, it has come down to 113. But still, the aim is that we bring it down further to about 75% reduction has to be done. So even
tele-ICUs is the answer for Dr. Kathirvel's problem.
Yeah, probably what he said seems quite right, that if we have a telemedicine and with the COVID setting up, probably most of the people are now friendly with the computers, and the telemedicine has taken up quite a big role.
So we should invest in tele-ICUs.
Person who is sitting in the center, he can then see what are the alerts. He can get in touch with the staff at the peripheral level and guide them so that the basic treatment can be started. He can see the alerts and then ask if the patient needs to be transferred or can they manage the patient there. So I think telemedicine has quite a good role, and it will also decrease the maternal mortality if we go through it now.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we will not end. I will not end before asking for a final comment from Dr. Vinita, Dr. Anju, Dr. Angelina, and Dr. Kajal. Just one sentence, one advice for a tertiary institute. How we can take a lead.
I feel first and foremost, let us make some protocols which
Yes.
are conducive to our own settings. Let's not copy them from the best. So if we have
also start training our people. Yeah.
And we should go and help the periphery.
And as
And
Dr.
improve the
Kathiwal
skills.
said,
Yes.
probably we should have a feedback mechanism.
Yes.
That is really, really important, because that is how they are going to learn in the periphery too.
Yes.
I feel that as soon as the patient comes, the first job is to triage. What kind of a patient is this? And then if it is uncomplicated, we put them in one category, some complications in another category, so that all our resources are going to be geared to the kind of patient it is. So that is the first thing. As soon as the patient comes, we should know what is the category of this patient, so that we can then allot our resources optimally, whatever we have, to the care of the patients.
So we are not a team of obstetricians, we are a team of obstetric medicine.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you
And
so much.
critical
Ma'am.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.